This is Unit 3. We've covered part of Unit 3, but we will be focusing more on the part of energy. In Unit 3, we covered about enzymes, so every time we will be looking at enzymes, it will be more like a review. Therefore, you take care of that part. Here, we'll be focusing on energy transformations, basically photosynthesis and respiration, and that will be that. So our key concepts here that we're going to be looking at is metabolism, thermodynamics, free energy, ATP coupling, metabolic rate, and then some self-assessment at the end. Now let's look at metabolism. So metabolism just refers to all the chemical reactions that are happening in your body. Think about us, we are like factories, and there are so many chemical reactions that are happening inside of us. And all those chemical reactions, they involve some form of energy. And the most interesting thing about metabolism in our body is that processes don't just happen independent of one another, but they are all connected. It is like a maze. So our body is extremely complicated and extremely connected together. So you find that one reaction is connected to the second, connected to the third, connected to the fourth. So all the reactions are connected together. And because all the reactions are connected together, it results in what we call a metabolic pathway. We try to look at this when we're looking at enzymes, but what these enzymes basically help is to connect one reaction and connect it to the next one. And the example that I gave in class was like when you're making an iPhone. You need the company or the factory which makes the batteries to easily connect with those that are going to be making the motherboard so that they understand exactly how much power will be coming from the battery to the motherboard. And then you connect to the factory that makes the cameras. So all the processes in our body, they are connected together, but they are connected by enzymes. So here we have a metabolic pathway, which means a reaction that is happening in the body that is involving many enzymes. But every time you form a product, then there is an enzyme that is involved. So for example, if you begin from A and you form B, it means there is an enzyme that is making that reaction to happen very fast. So to understand the number of enzymes involved in a metabolic pathway, just count the number of molecules involved. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 molecules involved. And therefore, that will help you understand that there are 3 enzymes, because every time you form a product, there is 1 enzyme. So you just say number of molecules involved minus 1. So if there are 4 molecules minus 1, then you know the enzymes that are involved. Then the next thing that you need to understand is that metabolic pathways, or the different kinds of reactions, are divided into 2 types: anabolic reactions and catabolic reactions. And when we combine these together in our body, it gives the total reactions inside of us. And we need to understand the meaning of catabolic reactions, or catabolism, and anabolism. So catabolic pathways they result in breakdown of complex molecules into simpler compounds. So you begin with something that is extremely complicated, and then you break it down into simple things. So catabolisms come from the Greek word kat, which means to break down. It's like saying a cation. I think you studied this in chemistry, cation. So these ones, they lose electrons. So catabolism is related to removing, cutting down, cutting into pieces. So don't read it as a cat, like in English, but it is from Greek. The other type of metabolic pathways, they are anabolic. So these are processes that build things. So when we have very simple things and then we build bigger things. Think about it like photosynthesis. So with the photosynthesis, we have very simple things like water, and then we have other things like carbon dioxide. And then when we build it together, we form our glucose, which is a very complex, big molecule. So that is the second type of chemical reactions that happen in living organisms or in our bodies. However, in every metabolic pathway, or every chemical process that happens in the body, you need energy. And there are two major forms of energy. There is what we call kinetic energy and potential energy. Kinetic energy is energy in motion. For example, thermal energy or kind of, if you think about it, the energy that produces heat. It is because the particles are moving around, and that's why they produce thermal energy. Mechanical energy, like when you're kicking a ball, it is because your muscles are moving. And because of that we call it our mechanical energy. It is an object that is moving, like your muscle. It has mechanical energy. Then electric energy, it is the charged particles that are moving in wires. So if you have a cable and the electrons that are moving through that cable, then we'll call that electric energy. Then what about magnetic energy? That one is just energy which is caused by magnetic fields. Magnetic fields, basically, they are forces that pull or push one another. So if you may have a magnet pulling and pushing each other. What about potential energy? It is energy that has been stored. For example, food, as you've read there, that is energy that has been stored. Or let's say you have a spring like that. That spring has got stored energy, because if you press it, you compress it. So this is a compressed spring, and then maybe you put something on top when it is compressed, and then you release it. It will give off that energy, and that object will, jump to a higher level. So the spring stores energy. But in biology, the thing that stores a lot of energy will be food, because if you are having food on your plate, it is just there. You may think it has nothing, but actually inside of it has got a lot of chemical energy. So now I say that we'll be looking at metabolism and thermodynamics, and thermodynamics basically refers to energy transformations. So here we are just looking at the different ways how energy changes form. So these are the laws. We've been studying about this for a very long time, but the reason why we keep on repeating them is because they are very necessary. First law is that energy cannot be destroyed or created, but we just change the form. For example, here you have solar energy. The plants are converting that solar energy into chemical energy. What's the chemical energy in here? It's the food, which is the glucose, because if you eat that glucose, it is chemical energy. Now, these are whichever animal, it will now consume the glucose to get energy. What kind of energy is it going to get? It is going to get ATP. It will allow it to move and run and do other things. But another thing it will help this animal is that it will create also more chemical energy. What is that chemical energy? It will create muscles. So the muscles, they have a lot of energy, like maybe other tissues like the skin. And therefore, this animal is storing a lot of chemical energy. The ATP is used to burn, is burned to allow the animal do its work, but then it stores a lot of chemical energy. And then the lion will feast onto that animal and get that chemical energy again. And the second law is just that when energy changes form, some of the energy is lost to the environment as heat. Now, whenever we lose energy to the environment as heat, it kind of disorganizes the surrounding, because that heat energy will kind of create some level of disorganization in the surrounding. If there are any particles, those particles are going to be dispersed, and a lot of disorganizationness will happen. And that level of disorganizationness in science is what we call entropy. So when things are very organized, like there, we say that they have low entropy, meaning they are not disorganized. But when things are spread out, then we say they are disorganized. Therefore, what does it mean? It means if you have a big complex molecule, which is together like that, that one will have low entropy. But now if you get it and you break it apart into different small parts, we will say that one you've increased entropy. Now, why do we say that whenever energy changes form, we increase entropy? Think about this. If you have glucose, it is over there, and you want to change it into ATP, what are you going to get? You're going to get carbon dioxide, and you're going to get water, which means you have broken down one molecule into two smaller molecules. In other words, these molecules, they are not going to be together the way glucose was together. Therefore, you have increased the level of disorganizationness around. And this organism that has consumed the glucose will be releasing this carbon dioxide into the surrounding. And that one increases entropy. Therefore, overall, whenever energy changes form, there is increase in entropy. But that doesn't mean that organisms always increase entropy. Sometimes organisms decrease entropy. Sometimes organisms increase entropy. The whole concept here that you need to learn is that decreasing entropy, it means you're getting smaller things and you're putting them together into one big thing or bigger things. There you are decreasing entropy. What about increasing entropy? Increasing entropy is when you have a big thing and you break it down into smaller things. So in which ways do organisms decrease entropy? When they carry out anabolic reactions. For example, photosynthesis. So photosynthesis decreases entropy because you are having carbon dioxide, which are smaller molecules, and water, and you're combining them together to form a bigger thing, which is glucose. So there you are decreasing entropy. You're building structures that are more organized, that are together. But increasing entropy is like respiration, where you have glucose, break it down into smaller particles, and then you form carbon dioxide and water, as well as ATP. So now the next concept we are looking at is called free energy. Now you may be wondering, why do we have processes in our body? Why do we have all these processes? The goal or the reason why we have the process in our body is to give off energy which can be used to do work. Because the whole point of having a body system is to allow us to do work. But we cannot do work if we don't have free energy. Therefore, the whole reason why we have all these processes in our body is to allow us to do work. Now, some processes in the body are able to give off energy, and other processes, they are not. And that's what we're going to be looking at. So free energy measures the portion of a system's energy that can perform work. And how do we know whether a reaction is going to give out energy or it is not going to give out energy? We simply measure the beginning of a reaction and the end of a reaction. If at the beginning, the reaction had a lot of energy, okay? And then at the end, the reaction had less energy. Remember the first law of thermodynamics. What did we say? Energy cannot be destroyed. Meaning, if a reaction began with a lot of energy and ended with less energy, it means that energy never went anywhere. It should be somewhere. So let's just give it a random number. Let's say we began with maybe 40 kilojoules, and then we ended up with 10 kilojoules. What does it mean? It means the 30 kilojoules is the difference between 40 and 10. So where did the 30 kilojoules go? It means that 40 kilojoules is the free energy. It means that if you have any reaction where the end products have less energy than the reactants or the starting materials, it means that reaction proceeds by giving off energy. So how do we know that a reaction is giving off energy? In simple terms, we look at what we call the energy change, represented by change in G. So this delta, or a triangle, it is actually, I think, Latin or Greek letter. It is called delta. It is normally used in math or physics to mean a change. So in order to understand whether a reaction is going to give off energy or it's not going to give off energy, we just calculate the change in energy, which we call delta G. G stands for Gibbs, the guy who first studied all this. Actually, it stands for Gibbs free energy because he's the guy who are studying all these energy transformations. So it's very simple. Just calculate the energy you have, Gibbs energy at the end, or Gibbs or G final, minus the one you had in the beginning. So if the answer is negative, because if the final is a small number and the initial is a big number, of course the difference is going to be negative. So the moment the final answer is negative, then you know that that reaction proceeds by giving off energy. Now, those reactions that proceed by giving off energy, or that have a negative change in free energy, we call them spontaneous reactions. So if they ask you about what's a spontaneous reaction, it's a reaction that proceeds by giving off free energy. And there is no input of energy for such reactions to happen. They just happen on their own. Those reactions that give off energy, they are also known as exergonic reactions. They proceed by giving off energy, like respiration. And you can see scientists calculated their Gibbs free energy of respiration is negative 686. You don't need to cram that. You don't need to calculate that. We don't do that in biology. What about endergonic reactions? So endergonic reactions, they proceed by gaining energy, meaning that these reactions at the end, the products have more energy, and in the beginning, they have less energy. So if we are to calculate the energy change final, let's say the final is 70 and the initial is 40. So we'll say 70 minus 40, and then we get something like 30. What does it mean? It means that that kind of reaction proceeded by absorbing energy. An example of that is photosynthesis. When we calculate the Gibbs free energy or change in energy for photosynthesis, it is always positive. It means the products, like glucose, they have more energy compared to the reactants. The reactants are here lower, carbon dioxide and water. We cannot instruct you like, hey, just breathe in carbon dioxide and take water and you'll get energy. You can't. However, if you eat glucose, which is basically carbon dioxide and water, you gain a lot of energy. So those are endergonic reactions. Basically, this classification of endergonic and exergonic, it is more of explaining which reaction proceeds by giving off energy, which reaction proceeds by gaining energy. And we can still say that exergonic reactions are usually catabolic, and endergonic reactions are usually anabolic. The third thing that we will be studying about today is called ATP coupling. What we mean by ATP coupling is that in our body, we have both endergonic reactions and we have also exergonic reactions. In other words, we have processes inside of our bodies that require energy in order to take place, and also we have processes that give out energy in order to take place. So now what happens in our body is that a process that requires energy is usually together with a process that gives off energy. So let's say this one gives off, and then this one takes in. So what happens is that the energy given off here will be used by this process, and the cycle keeps on happening the whole time. That's why all reactions in our body, they are connected together. So this is an example of ATP coupling. We have here, we want to form an amino acid called glutamine. But glutamine is formed from glutamic acid and ammonia. So in order for this reaction to happen, you see it has a positive Gibbs free energy. Positive means it requires that amount of energy, 3.4 kilocalories, in order to take place. However, when we break down ATP, that reaction of breaking down ATP, it gives off 7.3 kilocalories. It means that if we put this reaction and that reaction together, what will be the net energy change? The net energy change will be negative 3.9. Now, how is that a useful thing? It is useful in that even if this reaction requires energy, but if we put it together with this other reaction, the net energy change is going to be negative. At the end of these two reactions, we will still be having some energy available for use by other processes. Therefore, ATP coupling is a very efficient way of saving energy in the body. The next thing you're going to be looking at is metabolic rate, which is how fast fuels are burned. Fuels, we mean anything that is a source of energy. So like you, when you consume carbohydrates, that is your fuel. how fast do you burn it? That's what we call our metabolic rate. And also you're going to look at our thermoregulation, like how organisms control their temperature. The reason why we look at these two things together, it is because in our bodies, when we burn fuel, let's say glucose, if we are breaking it down, actually we call it burning because it releases heat, but the whole point is to get energy out of it. So the reason why we break down glucose is to get ATP. That's the whole point of breaking down glucose. But the problem that arises is that after breaking it down, we also get some heat. So heat is like some form of energy we never intended. It is a byproduct. Some organisms are able to use that heat to maintain their temperature, and other organisms are not able to use that heat. They just give it out. So that's why we combine the two concepts together: metabolic rate, like how fast do you burn your fuel, and then thermoregulation, like how do you use that byproduct from metabolism or from breaking down fuels to produce energy. So in this PDF, I'm gonna attach a PDF here on this recording. You will be focusing on the meaning of metabolic rate. You also look at basometabolic rate. What does it mean? You also need to look at the different ways how organisms can conserve their energy during extreme conditions like extreme heat or extreme coldness. So you look at concepts such as estivation, and also you look at concepts such as hibernation. And then lastly, you also look at the concept of surface area to volume ratio. Like, is it the big organisms with a higher metabolic rate, or is it the smaller organisms with a low metabolic rate, and why? So those are the concepts that you need to emphasize a lot. And then also you need to understand the difference between ectotherms as well as endotherms. But basically, they just refer to how organisms utilize this byproduct. Endotherms, they use that energy, the heat energy, to maintain their body temperature. Ectotherms, they just give it out and rely on the external environmental conditions to maintain their body temperature. So that's what we mean. And then these are self-assessment questions, so you read and you try to answer.